They say the person who represents themselves in court has a fool for a client. That's what billionaire Alexander Vance thought when his wife Carla stood up alone against his army of million-dollar lawyers. He laughed. He actually threw his head back and laughed in the middle of the trial. But 10 minutes later, that laughter died in his throat. The courtroom didn't just go silent, it froze. Because Carla didn't stand up to argue for money. She stood up to reveal a secret that Alexander had buried for 15 years. Watch carefully, because the twist in this courtroom will leave you shaking. It was a Tuesday evening in late October when Carla Vance's life officially ended, or so her husband thought. The sitting was the Obsidian Gala, the most exclusive charity event in Seattle. The chandeliers at the Fairmont Olympic Hotel were vibrating with the bass of a string quartet playing modern pop hits. Carla stood by the champagne tower, wearing a vintage emerald gown that she had hemmed herself. She looked elegant, but to the keen observer, she looked like a ghost. Her husband, Alexander Vance, the CEO of Vance Global Logistics and arguably the most powerful man in the Pacific Northwest, was on the other side of the room. He was holding court, surrounded by senators and tech moguls. Clinging to his arm was Jessica Miller, his 24-year-old executive assistant, wearing a diamond necklace that Carla had seen in Alexander's briefcase a week prior. He had told Carla it was an investment piece. Carla took a sip of water. She didn't drink alcohol anymore. She needed her mind sharp. For 12 years, she had been the invisible wife, the woman who raised their 2 sons, Liam and Noah. The woman who hosted the dinners, managed the household staff, and smoothed over Alexander's temper tantrums when stock prices dipped. To the world, she was the lucky girl who snagged the billionaire. To Alexander, she was furniture, expensive, aging furniture that he was ready to replace. The humiliation came at 8:15 p.m. A man in a cheap suit walked through the crowd of tuxedos. He didn't look like a guest. He looked like a process server. The room went quiet as he approached Carla, not Alexander. "Carla Vance?" the man asked, his voice cutting through the lull in conversation. "Yes," she whispered, her hand trembling slightly. "You've been served." He shoved a thick envelope into her hands. The room gasped. Alexander didn't look shocked. From across the room he raised his champagne glass to her, a smirk playing on his lips. It was a public execution of their marriage. He wanted everyone to see it. He wanted to break her spirit before the legal battle even began. Carla looked down at the papers. Petition for dissolution of marriage. And, in bold text further down, petition for sole custody. He wasn't just leaving her. He was taking the boys. Carla didn't scream. She didn't faint. She didn't throw her glass at him. She simply looked up, locked eyes with Alexander, and nodded once. It was a nod of acknowledgement, but Alexander interpreted it as submission. He turned to Jessica and laughed, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear. "Don't worry, darling. She's soft. She'll be out of the house by noon tomorrow. I've got Marcus Blackwood handling the paperwork." The name sent a chill through the room. Marcus Blackwood wasn't just a lawyer. He was a demolition expert in a suit. He had never lost a high-profile divorce case. He was known for leaving spouses destitute, destroying their reputations, and burying them in legal fees until they begged for mercy. Carla turned and walked out of the ballroom, her heels clicking a steady rhythm on the marble floor. She didn't cry until she was safely inside her terrifyingly quiet car. But as the tears fell, a memory surfaced. 12 years ago. Before the mansion, before the billions, before she was just a housewife. Carla had been a scholarship student at Yale Law. She had dropped out in her final year to support Alexander's first startup, sacrificing her degree so he could chase his dream. Alexander had forgotten that girl. He had forgotten that the brain behind his first business plan wasn't his. It was hers. He thought he was fighting a housewife. He had no idea he was about to wake up a sleeping dragon. 3 weeks later, the preliminary hearing was scheduled at the King County Superior Court. The atmosphere was suffocating. Alexander arrived in a convoy of 3 black SUVs. Reporters were swarming the steps. He stepped out looking like a movie star, wearing a bespoke navy suit, sunglasses, and a smile that said he owned the sidewalk he walked on. Flanking him were 4 lawyers, led by Marcus Blackwood. Blackwood looked like a predator. He was bald, stocky, and had eyes that seemed to assess the net worth of everyone he looked at. Carla arrived 10 minutes later. She took an Uber. She wore a simple gray pantsuit, off the rack from Macy's. She carried a single, battered leather briefcase that had belonged to her father. When they entered the courtroom, the disparity was laughable. On the plaintiff's side, Alexander's team occupied 2 tables. They had laptops, paralegals, and stacks of files. On the defendant's side, there was just Carla and a pitcher of water. Judge Harrison, a stern woman with a reputation for efficiency, entered the room. All rise. After the formalities, Judge Harrison looked over her glasses at the defense table. She frowned. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, her voice echoing. "I do not see counsel present for you. Is your attorney running late?" Alexander snickered. Blackwood didn't even look up from his papers. He was already bored. Carla stood up. Her voice shook for a split second before steadying. "No, Your Honor, I do not have counsel." "You are requesting a continuance to find representation?" Judge Harrison asked, her tone softening with pity. She had seen this before. The wealthy husband freezing the assets so the wife couldn't hire a decent lawyer. "No, Your Honor," Carla said clearly. "I will be representing myself." Silence. Then a sound that didn't belong in a courtroom. Alexander laughed. It was a bark of genuine amusement. "Oh, this is rich," he muttered loud enough for the stenographer to hear. Blackwood leaned over to Alexander and whispered, "This will be over before lunch. She's committing suicide." Judge Harrison banged her gavel. "Mr. Vance, compose yourself. Mrs. Vance, I must strongly advise against this." Mr. Blackwood is a seasoned litigator. The matters at hand involve billions of dollars in assets and, more importantly, the custody of 2 minors. "Are you sure you wish to proceed pro se?" "I'm sure, Your Honor," Carla said. She opened her battered briefcase and pulled out a single yellow legal pad. "Very well," the judge sighed. "Mr. Blackwood, your opening statement." Marcus Blackwood stood up. He didn't even use notes. He walked the floor like he owned it. "Your Honor," Blackwood began, his voice smooth as silk. "This case is simple. It is a tragedy, really. We have here a man, Alexander Vance, who has built an empire through tireless work. And we have a woman who has unfortunately succumbed to instability." Carla watched him, her face impassive. "We will prove," Blackwood continued, pacing towards the jury box, though there was no jury for this hearing. He played to the gallery, "that Mrs. Vance is mentally unfit to retain custody of the children. We have medical records indicating bouts of depression. We have witness testimony regarding her erratic behavior. And regarding the assets, we have a prenuptial agreement signed 12 years ago that strictly limits her settlement to a fixed sum of $500,000. Considering the estate is valued at $4.2 billion, Mr. Vance is being generous by offering her the guest cottage in addition to the prenup stipulation." He turned to Carla, smiling cruelly. "We just want what is best for the boys. We want to protect them from a mother who is clearly overwhelmed." Alexander nodded solemnly, playing the role of the concerned father perfectly. "Thank you, Mr. Blackwood," the judge said. She turned to Carla. "Mrs. Vance, your opening statement?" Carla stood up. She didn't walk the floor. She stood behind her table, gripping the edges until her knuckles turned white. "Your Honor," Carla said, "Mr. Blackwood speaks of a prenuptial agreement. He speaks of mental instability. He tells a very compelling story." She paused, looking directly at Alexander. For the first time, Alexander felt a prickle of unease. Her eyes weren't sad anymore. They were cold. "But stories are fiction, Your Honor," Carla continued. "I do not intend to tell a story. I intend to expose a ledger. Mr. Blackwood claims I am unfit. He claims I signed a prenup. I will not argue against the prenup today." Blackwood raised an eyebrow. "She's giving up already." "Instead," Carla said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming steel, I will be proving that the man sitting at the plaintiff's table is not Alexander Vance." The court went silent. Even the court reporter stopped typing. "Excuse me?" Judge Harrison asked, bewildered. "I mean," Carla said, reaching into her briefcase, "that the man legally known as Alexander Vance ceased to exist financially 5 years ago. The man sitting there is a fraud, operating under a shell corporation, registered in the Cayman Islands, to evade federal taxes and launder money for the Sinaloa cartel. And because the assets are proceeds of crime, there are no marital assets to divide. There is only evidence to be seized." She pulled out a blue flash drive and set it on the table. "And regarding custody, I think the Federal Bureau of Investigation, who I believe are entering the back of the courtroom right now, will agree that a federal prison cell is no place for 2 young boys." Alexander stopped laughing. His face went gray. The double doors at the back of the courtroom swung open. The double doors swung shut with a heavy thud, sealing the 2 men in dark suits inside the courtroom. They didn't arrest Alexander immediately. They didn't storm the plaintiff's table. Instead, they walked silently to the back row of the gallery and sat down, crossing their arms in unison. The silence in Department 42 was absolute. It was the kind of silence that usually precedes a bomb blast. Judge Harrison looked at the men, then back at Carla, and finally at the flash drive sitting innocuously on the defense table. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, her voice tight, "who are those men?" "Special Agents Miller and Ross from the FBI's White-Collar Crimes Division," Carla answered, her voice ringing clear. "I sent them a copy of this drive 3 days ago. They're here because they know that what happens in this courtroom in the next hour will determine whether Alexander Vance leaves here in a limousine or a federal transport van." "Objection!" Marcus Blackwood roared, leaping to his feet. His face was a mask of fury. "This is highly irregular. This is an ambush." "Mrs. Vance is introducing surprise evidence that was not shared in discovery. I move to have this entire line of argumentation stricken from the record, and Mrs. Vance held in contempt for theatrics." "It's not theatrics, Your Honor," Carla countered calmly, turning to the judge. "And it wasn't shared in discovery because under the crime-fraud exception to attorney-client privilege and spousal privilege, materials relating to ongoing criminal activity are not subject to standard suppression. Furthermore, Mr. Blackwood, you claimed in your opening statement that your client has nothing to hide. If that is true, you shouldn't fear a few PDF files." Alexander leaned over to Blackwood, whispering frantically, "What is on that drive, Marcus? Make it stop." Blackwood ignored him, his eyes fixed on the judge. "Your Honor, this is a divorce hearing, not a criminal trial." "Actually," Judge Harrison said, taking off her glasses and cleaning them slowly, a sign she was deeply unsettled, "this is a custody hearing. And if there is credible evidence that the children's father is engaged in organized crime, that is undeniably relevant to the welfare of the minors." "Objection overruled. Mrs. Vance, proceed. But be warned, if this is a waste of my time, you will lose everything." Carla nodded. She plugged the drive into the court's presentation system. The large monitor on the wall flickered to life. 12 years ago, Carla began, walking toward the screen, Alexander started Vance Global Logistics. It was a legitimate shipping company. But 3 years later, profit margins in the shipping industry collapsed due to rising fuel costs. Alexander was facing bankruptcy. He didn't tell me. He didn't tell his board. Instead, he took a meeting in Sinaloa, Mexico. Alexander slammed his hand on the table. "That was a vacation." "Sit down, Mr. Vance," the judge barked. Carla clicked a remote. A document appeared on the screen. It looked like a standard shipping manifest. "This is a manifest from a Vance Global container ship, the Sea King, dated November 14, 2018. It claims the cargo was agricultural machinery bound for Rotterdam. The declared value was $2 million. She clicked again. A bank transfer record appeared. "This is the payment received for that shipment. It wasn't $2 million. It was $45 million. Paid by a shell company called Blue Horizon Imports, registered in Panama." The gallery murmured, "Why would someone pay $45 million for tractors?" Carla asked rhetorically. "They wouldn't, but they would pay that for what was actually inside the tractors." She clicked again. A grainy photo appeared. It showed a hollowed-out tractor engine block, packed tight with vacuum-sealed bricks of white powder. "How did you get that?" Alexander gasped, his face draining of color. "You kept a digital trophy case, Alexander," Carla said, looking at him with pity. "On an encrypted server in the basement. You thought you were the only one with the password. You forgot that I set up the home network. I've known the password for 9 years. -1. That's your password, isn't it? Because you think everything you touch turns to gold." She turned back to the judge. "Your Honor, the drive contains 5 years of these manifests. It links Vance Global directly to the distribution network of the cartel. But that's not the worst part." Carla paused, letting the weight of the room settle on her shoulders. She looked at Blackwood, who was now frantically texting on his phone under the table. "The worst part is how he laundered the money," Carla said softly. "He didn't just use offshore accounts, he used the children's trust funds." A collective gasp went through the room. Even the stoic FBI agents in the back leaned forward. "Noah and Liam," Carla said, her voice cracking for the first time. "My sons." He set up educational trusts in their names. He funneled the drug money into these trusts, paid taxes on it as inheritance from fictitious relatives, and then withdrew it as loans back to the company. He made our children accomplices to federal money laundering before they could even read. She pointed a shaking finger at Alexander. He didn't just break the law. He wrapped our children in his crimes so that if he ever went down, the boys' assets would be seized too. He used them as human shields. Alexander stood up, his composure shattering. "She's lying. She's crazy. Marcus, do something." Marcus Blackwood stood up, but he didn't object. He slowly began to pack his briefcase. "Mr. Blackwood," Judge Harrison asked, "where are you going?" "Your Honor," Blackwood said, his voice flat. "I must request a recess to confer with my client regarding potential conflict of interest. If these allegations are true, I cannot suborn perjury." "You're walking out on me?" Alexander screamed, grabbing Blackwood's arm. "I pay you $3,000 an hour." "Get your hand off me," Blackwood hissed, shaking him off. "I defend greedy husbands, Alexander. I don't defend cartel mules. You're on your own." Blackwood walked out. The heavy doors closed behind him. Alexander was alone at the massive table. The 4 junior lawyers who had been behind him looked at each other, then began closing their laptops, distancing themselves physically from him. "Mrs. Vance," Judge Harrison said, her eyes wide, "is that the extent of your evidence?" "No, Your Honor," Carla said. She walked back to her table and took a sip of water. "That was just the introduction. Now I would like to call my first witness." She turned to the man who was now sweating through his bespoke Italian suit. "I call Alexander Vance to the stand." Alexander Vance took the stand like a man walking to the gallows, but his arrogance was a hard habit to break. As he sat down, he adjusted his tie and shot a glare at Carla. He still believed he could talk his way out of this. He was a CEO. He was a charmer. She was just his wife. "Mr. Vance," Carla began. She didn't stand at the podium. She stood right in front of the witness box, invading his space. "You stated in your affidavit that I am mentally unstable and paranoid. Is that correct?" "Yes," Alexander said, his voice regaining some of its smooth timbre. "You spend all day at home. You imagine things. This whole conspiracy theory, it's a delusion, Carla. You need help." "A delusion," Carla repeated. "So the bank records I just showed the court, those are fake?" "They are manipulated," Alexander lied. "Context is everything. International shipping is complex. You wouldn't understand." "I wouldn't understand," she echoed. "Mr. Vance, do you remember who passed the logistics certification exam for Vance Global in 2013 because you failed it twice?" Alexander's jaw tightened. "I don't recall." "I do. It was me. I took the test under your name online. I know shipping, Alexander. Which is why I want to ask you about Jessica Miller." At the mention of his mistress's name, Alexander flinched. "She is my executive assistant. She has nothing to do with this." "Does she?" Carla picked up a piece of paper. This is a deed to a penthouse apartment in Miami, purchased 3 months ago. The owner of record is Jessica Miller. The purchase price was $4.5 million paid in cash. She leaned in closer. Can you explain to the court how an executive assistant on a salary of $65,000 a year had $4.5 million in cash? She comes from a wealthy family, Alexander stammered. No, she doesn't, Carla corrected sharply. Her father is a mechanic in Ohio. I checked. But here is the interesting part, Alexander. The money for that apartment didn't come from your bank account. It came from the Noah Vance Educational Trust. The judge gasped audibly. You stole from our son to buy a penthouse for your mistress, Carla said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. Did you think I wouldn't notice? Or did you just not care? I didn't stealing anything, Alexander snapped, losing his cool. It's my money. I earned it. I built that company while you sat at home drinking tea. You are nothing without me, Carla. Nothing. I am the mother of your children, Carla said, her voice dropping to a terrifying whisper. And I am the woman who kept your secrets, but I'm done keeping them. She walked back to her table and picked up a small red notebook. It was old, the cover peeling. When Alexander saw the notebook, his eyes bulged. He practically tried to climb over the witness stand rail. Where did you get that? He shrieked. That was in the safe! The biometric safe! You use your birthday for everything, Alexander, Carla said dryly. It's not hard to crack. She turned to the judge. Your Honor, this is what Mr. Vance calls his ledger of debts. It doesn't contain financial numbers. It contains names of safety inspectors he bribed, names of customs officials he paid off, and names of people who disappeared. The courtroom temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. The FBI agents in the back stood up. Mr. Vance, Carla said, opening the book. On page 42, there is an entry dated July 4th, 2021. It says, problem with Foreman Gentle. Solved. $50,000. Do you recall Foreman Gentile? Alexander was hyperventilating. He looked at the door, then at the judge, then at Carla. I take the fifth, he sputtered. I refuse to answer. This is a civil hearing, Mr. Vance, Judge Harrison said icily. While you can plead the fifth, the court is allowed to draw an adverse inference from your silence. And considering the evidence Mrs. Vance has presented, the inference I am drawing is damning. He was going to talk, Alexander blurted out, sweat pouring down his face. Gentile. He found the stash in the container. He was going to call the police. I didn't tell them to hurt him. I just told them to make him quiet. I paid them to keep him quiet. The courtroom erupted. He had just confessed to ordering a hit, or at least facilitating one. Carla closed the notebook. She didn't look triumphant. She looked sad. Foreman Gentile had 3 kids, Alexander, she said softly, just like us. I didn't know. Alexander was sobbing now, a pathetic, broken figure in a ruined suit. I just wanted the deal to go through. The cartel. They don't take no for an answer, Carla. You don't understand. They own me. If I stop, they kill me. They kill all of us. He looked at the FBI agents, desperation in his eyes. You have to put me in protective custody. You have to arrest me. Please, if I walk out of here, I'm a dead man. Carla looked at the judge. I have no further questions, Your Honor. Judge Harrison looked at Alexander with pure disgust. Mr. Vance, you are remanded into the custody of the Federal Bureau of Investigation immediately. The bailiff will secure the defendant. As the bailiff moved in and the FBI agents stepped forward to cuff the billionaire, Alexander looked at Carla one last time. Why, he whispered, tears streaming down his face. Why didn't you just take the settlement? We could have been rich forever. Carla leaned down, her face inches from his. Because, she whispered, you laughed at me. As the handcuffs clicked, the reality of the situation set in. But for Carla, the war wasn't over. Alexander was going to prison, but the people he worked for, the people who didn't take no for an answer, were still out there. And she had just exposed their entire operation on public record. The judge banged her gavel. Court is adjourned. Carla packed her briefcase. Her hands were steady, but her heart was pounding. She had won the battle, but she had just painted a target on her back for the most dangerous criminal organization in the hemisphere. She turned to leave, but the courtroom doors opened again. A woman walked in. She was tall, wearing sunglasses and a scarf that covered most of her face. It was Jessica Miller. And she was holding a gun. The screams didn't start immediately. For a heartbeat, the brain refuses to process the impossible. A courtroom is a sanctuary of words, of laws, of paper. It is not a place for a compact 9mm pistol in the hands of a 24-year-old woman wearing Chanel. "Nobody move!" Jessica Miller screamed, her voice shrill and breaking. The cool, detached mistress was gone. In her place was a terrified animal backed into a corner. Alexander, still cuffed, looked at her with a mixture of confusion and relief. "Jessica! Baby! Thank God! Get the keys from the bailiff! We can run! The plane is at Boeing Field!" Jessica swung the gun toward him. "Shut up, you idiot! Shut up!" Alexander froze. "Jessica?" "You talked," she hissed, her eyes wild, scanning the room, checking the FBI agents who had frozen with their hands halfway to their holsters. "You weren't supposed to talk, Alexander. The deal was simple. You make the money, you keep your mouth shut. Now we're all dead." Carla stood behind her table, perfectly still. Her mind was racing. She's not just a mistress, she's the handler. It all made sense. The sudden appearance of Jessica 2 years ago, the way she isolated Alexander, the way she was always in the room during his business calls. The cartel didn't trust a soft American billionaire to run their logistics without supervision. Jessica was the babysitter, and the babysitter had just realized her charge had become a liability. "Jessica," Agent Ross said calmly, his hands raised, "put the weapon down. There are armed marshals outside that door. You aren't walking out of here." "I'm not walking out anyway," she screamed, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "If he goes into custody, he spills everything. He names names. And if he names names, they come for me. I'm not going to let him ruin my life." She leveled the gun at Alexander's chest. "Jessica, no!" Alexander shrieked, cowering behind his chair. "I love you. I bought you the penthouse." "You bought me nothing," she spat. "I was assigned to you, and you were the most boring, pathetic assignment I ever had. God, you are weak." Her finger tightened on the trigger. "Jessica!" The voice cut through the panic. "It wasn't the FBI agent, it was Carla." Jessica blinked, shifting the gun slightly toward Carla. "Don't be a hero, housewife. I'll kill you too. You started this." "I did," Carla agreed, her voice steady, though her knees were shaking violently under the table. "I started this, and I have the drive." Jessica's eyes darted to the blue flash drive still plugged into the court computer. "The drive is evidence," Jessica snapped. "It's useless to me now." "Not that drive," Carla lied smoothly. "The other drive, the one I didn't give to the FBI." The room went silent. Even Agent Ross looked at Carla with surprise. "What are you talking about?" Jessica demanded. "Alexander kept a ledger of debts," Carla said, stepping slowly around her table, moving into the open. "But he also kept a ledger of payments. Specifically, the payments made to your personal offshore accounts, Jessica. The ones you were skimming from the cartel." Jessica's face went white. "You're lying," she whispered. "Am I?" Carla bluffed. "You think Alexander's the only one who can cook books?" "I saw the discrepancies in the Blue Horizon accounts. You were taking a 5% cut off the top before the money even hit the laundering cycle. The cartel doesn't know you were stealing from them, do they? But if I give that drive to the press, or to your bosses, they won't just kill you, they'll make it last a week." Jessica wavered, the gun lowered an inch. The fear of prison was nothing compared to the fear of what the cartel did to thieves. "Where is it?" Jessica asked, her voice trembling. "It's in my purse," Carla said, pointing to the bag on her table. "Let Alexander go. Let the agents take him. You take the drive and run. With the encryption key I have, you can disappear. Without it, they find you." It was a gamble, a massive, terrifying gamble. There was no second drive. There was no proof Jessica was stealing, though Carla had suspected it. She was banking on the greed of a criminal. Jessica looked at Alexander. then at the purse. "Kick it over to me." Carla nudged the purse with her foot. It slid across the floor, stopping 5 feet from Jessica. Greed won. Jessica took a step forward, lowering the gun to reach for the bag. Bang! The shot didn't come from Jessica. Agent Miller, seizing the split second of distraction, fired a single round from his concealed sidearm. The bullet struck Jessica's shoulder, spinning her around. She dropped the gun and screamed, clutching her arm as she fell to the floor. "Secure the weapon!" Miller shouted, rushing forward. The courtroom exploded into chaos. Marshals burst through the doors. Agent Ross tackled Alexander, who was trying to crawl under the table. Jessica was wailing on the floor, handcuffed instantly. Carla stood amidst the madness, her ears ringing. She watched them drag her husband away. He wasn't looking at Jessica anymore. He was looking at Carla. "You planned this!" Alexander screamed as they hauled him out. "You witch! You planned all of it!" Carla didn't answer. She just watched him disappear through the side door. Judge Harrison, who had taken cover behind her bench, slowly stood up. She looked at Carla with a mixture of awe and terror. "Mrs. Vance," the judge said, her voice shaky, "are you all right?" Carla looked down at her purse. She picked it up. "No, Your Honor," Carla said softly. "I'm not." She turned to Agent Miller, who was holstering his weapon. "Agent Miller," she said, "I need to pick up my children now." The Seattle twilight was heavy with rain. The courthouse was surrounded by media vans. The news had broken instantly. Billionaire arrested in courtroom shootout. Wife exposes cartel ring. Carla Vance didn't leave through the front door. The marshals escorted her out the loading dock, into the back of an armored SUV. "We're taking you to a safe house," Agent Miller said from the front seat. "We have a location in Tacoma. You and the boys will be processed for witness protection in the morning. Your life as Carla Vance is over." Carla looked out the window at the blurred city lights. "I can't go to Tacoma." "It's not a request, Mrs. Vance," Miller said. "You just cost the Sinaloa cartel nearly $500 million and their primary distribution hub in the Northwest. You have a price on your head the size of a lottery jackpot. If we don't hide you, you'll be dead by midnight." "I need to get my boys from school," Carla said calmly. "St. Jude's Prep." "We already have a team en route to secure them," Miller assured her. "They are safe." Carla felt a cold knot in her stomach. "Cancel the team." Miller turned around. "Excuse me?" "Cancel the team," Carla repeated, her voice hard. "The head of security at St. Jude's is on Alexander's payroll. If a federal team shows up, he'll know something is wrong. He has instructions to take the boys to a secondary location if law enforcement appears. It's a contingency plan Alexander made years ago." Miller cursed under his breath and grabbed his radio. "Dispatch, abort extraction at St. Jude's. Repeat, abort, suspected hostile on site." He looked at Carla. "How do we get them?" "I get them," Carla said. "He knows me. He thinks I'm the submissive wife. If I show up, he won't panic." Miller hesitated, then nodded. "Driver, reroute to St. Jude's, but we are sticking to you like glue." The drive to the private school took 20 agonizing minutes. When they arrived, Carla told the agents to wait out of sight. She fixed her hair, smoothed her coat, and walked into the lobby. The head of security, a burly ex-cop named Strickland, was standing by the reception desk. He looked tense. He had probably seen the news. "Mrs. Vance," Strickland said, stepping in her way. "I saw the report. Where is Mr. Vance?" "He's handling the press, Strickland," Carla lied effortlessly. "It's a misunderstanding. Lawyers are fixing it." "But," Alexander called, "he's worried about protesters. He wants me to take the boys to the lake house immediately." Strickland narrowed his eyes. "He didn't call me." "He doesn't have his phone," Carla said, stepping closer. "The FBI seized it. He used his lawyer's phone. Look, do you want to explain to Alexander why his children were left here when the reporters swarmed the gates? You know his temper." Strickland hesitated. The fear of Alexander Vance was a powerful motivator. "Fine," Strickland grunted. "I'll bring them out." 5 minutes later, Liam, 10, and Noah, 8, came running out with their backpacks. They looked confused but happy to see their mother. "Mom!" Liam chirped. Dad said he was picking us up. Plans changed, sweetie, Carla said, hugging them tight. She ushered them quickly toward the waiting SUV. As soon as they were inside, the doors locked. Go, Carla told the driver. To the safe house, Miller asked. Carla looked at her sons, who were now staring at the armed agents with wide eyes. No, Carla said. Take us to Boeing Field. Mrs. Vance, Miller warned, we control the airspace. You aren't flying anywhere. I'm not flying, Carla said, but the evidence you need to dismantle the rest of the network is there. In Hangar 4. Alexander didn't just keep digital records, he kept physical samples. Leverage against his partners. If you want to finish this, we go to the hangar. Then I'll go to your safe house. Miller weighed the options. The arrest was good, but physical evidence was better. Fine. Hangar 4, then straight to lockdown. They arrived at the private airfield under the cover of darkness. The rain was lashing down now. Hangar 4 was a massive, dark structure at the edge of the tarmac. The SUV stopped. Miller and 3 other agents got out, guns drawn. Stay in the car, Miller ordered Carla. I have the key code, she said, opening her door. And the biometric override. You can't get in without me. She stepped out into the rain, holding Liam and Noah's hands. Stay close to me, boys, just like a game. They walked to the side door of the hangar. Carla punched in a code, 1024-11, her wedding anniversary. The door hissed open. The hangar was dark, smelling of jet fuel and dust. Inside, there was a sleek Gulfstream jet, but also stacks of crates along the wall. The crates, Carla pointed. Back wall. That's the leverage. Agent Miller signaled his team to move in. They advanced toward the crates, flashlights cutting through the gloom. As the agents moved away, Carla stopped. She looked at a smaller, unassuming door near the entrance marked maintenance. Mom? Noah whispered. I'm scared. I know, baby, Carla whispered back. Run! She didn't follow the agents. She grabbed her sons and bolted through the maintenance door. Mrs. Vance! Miller shouted from across the hangar, spinning around. But Carla had already slammed the door and thrown the deadbolt. They were in a garage attached to the hangar. Sitting there, under a dusty tarp, was a nondescript Toyota Camry. Not a luxury car, a ghost car. Carla had bought it cash 3 years ago under the name Sarah Jenkins. She threw the boys into the back seat and jumped into the driver's side. The keys were under the floor mat, exactly where she left them. The engine roared to life. She hit the garage door opener. The door began to rise. Behind her, the agents were pounding on the steel maintenance door. They would shoot the lockout in seconds. Carla gunned the engine. The Camry screeched out of the garage, drifting onto the wet tarmac, away from the SUV, away from the FBI, and away from the life of Carla Vance. She didn't head for the main gate. She knew the agents would radio ahead to block it. She drove toward the perimeter fence at the south end of the field, the old section. Hold on, she yelled to the boys. She accelerated to 60 miles per hour. The chain-link fence loomed. Crash! The car smashed through the fence. Metal, screaming against metal, windshield cracking but holding. They bounced onto the dirt surface road outside the airport. Carla didn't slow down. She merged onto the obscure back roads that led toward the Canadian border crossing at a remote logging point, a crossing she knew was unmanned after 10 p.m. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was Agent Miller. She rolled down the window and threw the phone out into the rain. Mom, where are we going? Liam asked, his voice trembling. Carla looked in the rearview mirror. No lights behind them. Not yet. We're going on an adventure, Carla said, her voice finally breaking as the adrenaline crash hit her. Just us. She reached under the passenger seat and pulled out a thick envelope. Inside were 3 Canadian passports, Sarah Jenkins, Michael Jenkins, David Jenkins. She had prepared for the divorce. She had prepared for the arrest. But she knew one thing the FBI didn't. The cartel had moles in the Department of Justice. If she went into witness protection, she would be found in a week. Alexander laughed when she represented herself. He thought she was playing lawyer. He didn't realize she was playing for her life. She drove into the darkness, leaving the billion-dollar ruin of her marriage in the rearview mirror. But as she crossed the county line, the car radio, which she had left on low, crackled with a breaking news update. Sources confirmed that Alexander Vance has been denied bail. However, in a shocking turn of events, the prison transport van carrying Vance to the federal detention center was ambushed on I-5 just moments ago. 2 guards are reported down. Alexander Vance is missing. Carla slammed on the brakes, the car skidding on the wet asphalt. Silence filled the car, heavy and suffocating. He was out. The cartel hadn't killed him, they had taken him. Or worse, he had paid them off with the money she hadn't found yet. Carla gripped the steering wheel until her knuckles turned white. The game wasn't over. It had just moved to the next level. "Mom?" Liam asked. "Why did we stop?" Carla looked at her son. She put the car back in gear. "We didn't stop, Liam," she said, her eyes turning to steel. "We're just changing the route." The rain had turned from a drizzle into a torrential downpour, hammering the roof of the stolen Camry like gravel. Carla's hands were steady on the wheel, but her eyes were darting constantly to the rearview mirror. She knew Alexander better than anyone. She knew he wouldn't run to Mexico, not without the money. And she knew that he knew exactly where she was going. Years ago, during the only happy summer they had as a family, they had bought a dilapidated cabin near the Canadian border in Blaine, Washington. It was purchased under a shell company intended to be a renovation project that Alexander inevitably got bored with. It was off the grid. It was the only place he would look for her because it was the only property she had ever truly loved. "Mom, are the bad men coming?" Noah asked, from the back seat, his voice small. "No, baby," Carla lied, her voice soft but firm. "We're playing the final level of the game, and we're going to win." She pulled the car off the main road, tires crunching onto a gravel logging path. She didn't drive to the cabin. She drove 2 miles past it, to an old logging staging area that overlooked the valley. She killed the engine and the lights. "Listen to me," Carla said, turning to her sons. "I need you to take these sleeping bags and go behind that rock ridge. Do not come out until I say the code word. The code word is sunrise. Do you understand?" "What are you going to do?" Liam asked, clutching his brother's hand. "I'm going to finish the negotiation," Carla said. She watched her sons disappear into the darkness of the tree line. Then, she sat on the hood of the car, the rain soaking her clothes, and waited. She didn't have to wait long. 20 minutes later, a pair of headlights cut through the gloom. A black SUV, battered and with a shattered side window, tore up the logging road. It skidded to a halt 10 yards from her. The door flew open. Alexander Vance stepped out. He looked nothing like the billionaire CEO who had sipped champagne at the gala weeks ago. His expensive suit was torn and muddy. He was handcuffed on one wrist, the other cuff dangling loose where the chain had been shot or cut. He was bleeding from a gash on his forehead, and in his hand he held a heavy service revolver, likely taken from one of the guards in the transport van. "I knew it," Alexander rasped, walking toward her, the gun leveling at her chest. "I knew you'd come here. You always were sentimental, Carla. It's your fatal flaw." "And you always were predictable, Alexander," Carla said, not moving from the hood of the car. "You escaped the van, but you didn't run. Why?" "Because you have the keys," Alexander screamed, his voice cracking. "The crypto keys. The $500 million. You moved the money before you gave the drive to the FBI. I checked the accounts while I was in the holding cell. They were empty. You stole it." "I didn't steal it," Carla corrected calmly. "I secured it." "Give it to me," Alexander demanded, taking a step closer. The rain plastered his hair to his skull. "The cartel hit the van. They didn't come to rescue me, Carla. They came to kill me. I barely got away. If I don't pay them back with interest by tomorrow morning, they will skin me alive. Give me the codes and I disappear. You never see me again." Carla looked at him, really looked at him. For the last time, she saw the fear, the greed, and the hollowness. "No," she said. Alexander blinked, stunned. "What did you say?" "I said no. You don't get the money. You don't get to disappear to a beach in non-extradition territory, while the boys and I spend the rest of our lives looking over our shoulders. That's not how this story ends." Alexander's face twisted into a snarl. He raised the gun to her head. "I will kill you, Carla. I swear to God. I have nothing left to lose. Give me the codes, or I blow your brains out and find the boys. I know they're here." "If you pull that trigger," Carla said, her voice dropping to a terrifyingly calm register, "you die in 3 minutes." Alexander hesitated. "What?" Carla reached into her pocket and pulled out a small black remote. It looked like a garage door opener. "Do you remember the security system we installed at the warehouse?" Carla asked. "The silent alarm linked to the private contractors." "This isn't the warehouse," Alexander spat. "No," Carla said, "but my phone is in my pocket. And for the last 10 minutes, it has been broadcasting a live GPS signal on a frequency monitored by the Sinaloa cartel." Alexander froze. The blood drained from his face. "I didn't steal the money for myself, Alexander," Carla continued, stepping off the hood and walking toward the gun. "I stole it to buy my freedom. I contacted El Santo an hour ago. I offered him a trade. The $500 million back, every cent of it, in exchange for you." Alexander lowered the gun slightly, his mouth hanging open. You sold me to them?" "I gave them your location," Carla said. "They are about 2 minutes out. Look at the road." Alexander whipped his head around. In the distance down in the valley, a convoy of 3 vehicles was winding its way up the logging road, moving fast. "You're lying," Alexander whispered, backing away. "You're lying." "Am I?" Carla asked. "You created this world, Alexander. You brought the wolves into our house. I just opened the door and let them eat the hand that fed them." Alexander looked at the approaching lights, then at Carla, then at the dark woods where his children were hiding. Panic, primal and absolute, took over. "Give me the car keys," he begged, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "Carla, please. I'm your husband. I'm their father." "You ceased to be their father when you put their names on your laundering accounts," Carla said coldly. She tossed the keys, not to him, but into the tall grass of the ravine behind her. "No!" Alexander screamed. He scrambled toward the edge, trying to find them in the dark. The headlights of the convoy swept over the clearing. Tires crunched on gravel. Doors slammed. Alexander spun around, raising his gun, but he was blinded by the high beams. "Don't shoot!" he screamed. "I have the money! She has the money!" But the men who stepped out of the SUVs weren't interested in negotiation. They were professionals. They wore tactical gear and carried rifles. But then a voice boomed from a loudspeaker. "This is the FBI. Drop your weapons. We have the perimeter surrounded." Alexander looked confused. Carla didn't. From the tree line surrounding the clearing, floodlights snapped on, blinding the cartel hitmen. Dozens of FBI agents in SWAT gear emerged from the woods. Carla hadn't called the cartel to trade. She had called Agent Miller. She had used herself as bait to lure both Alexander and the cartel hit squad into a single kill box. Gunfire erupted. The cartel mercenaries, realizing they were trapped, opened fire. The FBI returned it. Carla dropped to the ground, crawling behind the engine block of the Camry. Alexander, caught in the middle, looked wildly between the FBI and the cartel. He realized, finally, that he was alone. There was no escape. He looked at Carla one last time. He didn't look angry anymore. He looked impressed. He raised his hands, dropping the gun. "I surrender," he screamed. Agent Miller tackled him into the mud. The firefight lasted less than a minute. The cartel hitmen were neutralized or surrendered. The clearing fell silent, save for the heavy breathing of men and the sound of rain. Agent Miller hauled Alexander up. The billionaire was covered in mud, defeated. Miller walked over to Carla, who was standing up, brushing the dirt off her knees. "You cut it close, Mrs. Vance," Miller said, holstering his weapon. "You told us he would be here at midnight. It's 11:59. "I know my husband," Carla said quietly. "He's never late for a transaction." Miller nodded. "We have the cartel squad. We have Alexander. And thanks to the codes you sent us, we secured the offshore accounts. It's over." Carla looked at Alexander as they shoved him into the back of a federal armored vehicle, a real one this time. He didn't say anything. He just hung his head. "Can I go now?" Carla asked. Miller looked at her. He knew she had fake passports in her pocket. He knew she had a plan to disappear that didn't involve the witness protection program. He looked at the woods where the boys were hiding. "Technically," Miller said, turning his back to her, "I have a lot of paperwork to do. It might take me 10 minutes to secure the scene. If a civilian vehicle were to leave in that time, I probably wouldn't notice." Carla smiled. "Thank you, Agent." She walked to the ravine, reached into her pocket, and pulled out the spare key to the Camry. She hadn't thrown the real ones. She walked to the tree line. "Sunrise," she whispered. Liam and Noah emerged, sleepy but safe. They climbed into the car. Carla Vance reversed the car, turned around, and drove past the FBI blockade, past the ruined life she had known, and onto the road north. The border was 5 miles away. The trial of Alexander Vance was the most watched legal event of the decade. Without his high-priced lawyers, and with his wife's testimony on record, the wolf of logistics crumbled. He was sentenced to 125 years in a federal supermax prison for racketeering, money laundering, and conspiracy to commit murder. Jessica Miller testified against him to reduce her sentence to 10 years. As for Carla Vance, she vanished. Some say she is living in a small village in the Swiss Alps, running a bakery. Others say she is in New Zealand, designing software. The FBI officially lists her case as closed/relocated. But 6 months after the trial, a package arrived at the offices of the Seattle Women's Shelter. It contained no note, only a cashier's check for $5 million, drawn from a bank in the Cayman Islands that shouldn't exist. Alexander Vance laughed when his wife stood up to represent herself. He didn't realize that while he was playing for money, she was playing for blood. And in the court of life, the quiet ones are always the most dangerous. If this story had you holding your breath, hit that like button right now. It helps us create more thrillers just like this one. What would you do if you found your partner's secret book of crimes? Would you run? Or would you fight, like Carla? Let me know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a twist. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next story.